Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 15th of July. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today vowed that the nuclear agreement signed between the P5+1 nations and Iran is not the last word. The government is now planning a global effort to discredit and roll the deal back, including help from opposition leader Isaac Herzog. Here with more is IBA's diplomatic correspondent Eli Wogelenter.
Speaking before the Knesset to honor the memory of the revisionist Zionist leader Ze'ev Jabotinsky, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that it was Israel's vocal opposition to the Iran nuclear program that delayed Tehran's attainment of the bomb. We brought the Iranian issue to the attention of world public opinion, Netanyahu said. If it wasn't for us, there would not have been a discussion about it. If it weren't for Israel's efforts, Iran would have gained possession of a nuclear weapon a long time ago. And the Prime Minister emphasized just how bad the deal is, saying, when we read the agreement, the picture becomes even bleaker because we discover more absurd things in it. Netanyahu criticized the world powers for their Western powers for their willingness to accept tyrannical regimes, a theme that connected with the remembrance session in honor of Jabotinsky, who was credited with foreseeing the danger posed to European Jewry by the rise of Nazism. This is different than 1938 because back then there was no precedent, Netanyahu said. Now there is. And then we didn't have a country. Now we do. Netanyahu met with the Security Cabinet last night, after which he blasted the Iranian nuclear deal.
The world is a much more dangerous place today than it was yesterday. The leading international powers have bet our collective future on a deal with the foremost sponsor of international terrorism. They've gambled that in 10 years' time, Iran's terrorist regime will change while removing any incentive for it to do so. In fact, the deal gives Iran every incentive not to change. In the coming decade, the deal will reward Iran, the terrorist regime in Tehran, with hundreds of billions of dollars. This cash bonanza will fuel Iran's terrorism worldwide, its aggression in the region, and its efforts to destroy Israel, which are ongoing. Amazingly, this bad deal does not require Iran to cease its aggressive behavior in any way. And just last Friday, that aggression was on display for all to see. While the negotiators were closing the deal in Vienna, Iran's supposedly moderate president chose to go to a rally in Tehran. And at this rally, a frenzied mob burned American and Israeli flags and chanted, "Death to America, death to Israel." Now, this didn't happen 4 years ago. It happened 4 days ago. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, said on March 21st that the deal does not limit Iran's aggression in any way. He said, negotiations with the United States on the nuclear issue and on nothing else. And 3 days ago, he made that clear again. The United States, he said, embodies global arrogance, and the battle against it will continue unabated even after the nuclear agreement is concluded. Here's what Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Iran's terrorist proxy Hezbollah, said about sanctions relief, which is a key component of the deal. He said, a rich and strong Iran will be able to stand by its allies and friends in the region more than at any time in the past. Translation? Iran's support for terrorism and subversion will actually increase after the deal. In addition to filling Iran's terror war chest, this deal repeats the mistakes made with North Korea. There too, we were assured that inspections and verifications would prevent a rogue regime from developing nuclear weapons. And we all know how that ended. The bottom line of this very bad deal is exactly what Iran's President Rouhani said today. The international community is removing the sanctions, and Iran is keeping its nuclear program. By not dismantling Iran's nuclear program, in a decade, this deal will give an unreformed, unrepentant, and far richer terrorist regime the capacity to produce many nuclear bombs, in fact, an entire nuclear arsenal with the means to deliver it. What a stunning, historic mistake. Israel is not bound by this deal with Iran, and Israel is not bound by this deal with Iran because Iran continues to seek our destruction. We will always defend ourselves.
President Barack Obama called Netanyahu last night to assure him that the agreement with Iran will verifiably prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon while ensuring the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program going forward. The White House summary of the phone call omitted Netanyahu's response. Meanwhile, other Israeli politicians weighed in on the agreement. By its UD leader, Naftali Bennett specifically cited what he called the farcical inspection system as a major problem.
I think this is a terrible, historic mistake. I think July 14th, 2015 will be remembered as the day that the world paved the way for a new nuclear terror superpower, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Because here's the main point. We keep on hearing that it's a verifiable sanction regime. But here's the thing. In order to go and make an inspection, you have to notify the Iranians 24 days in advance. That's a farce. Of course, that within the 24 days, they're going to clean up the facility, get away with the inspections, and continue, go on with what they do. Imagine a local police station raiding a drug baron and telling him a month in advance that we're going to raid you. You cannot have verifiable inspections if you have to notify them in advance and they can object, and then there's a committee. This is not serious. I'll remind you that originally they said anytime, any place. It was supposed to be surprise inspections, but there's no surprise here anymore.
Following yesterday's meeting of the Security Cabinet, Netanyahu hosted Opposition Chairman Yitzhak Herzog and updated him on the briefings that were given at the Security Cabinet regarding the security significance of the nuclear agreement. The two agreed on a united front against the deal, beginning with Herzog traveling to the United States.
I've discussed in recent hours with our friends at AIPAC and other bodies in the United States, and I intend to go out there, speak and meet with relevant people and organizations in order to explain the inherent risks entailed in the agreement to Israel and the region at large, and to demand that Israel receives a full-fledged military and security umbrella that will keep its qualitative and military edge in order to be able to challenge the risks entailed in this agreement and further challenges coming out of this agreement in the near and long-term future.
Sources in the Prime Minister's office say Netanyahu will now focus on lobbying U.S. lawmakers in Congress to reject the deal. Erin?
Thanks for that report. And in what appears to be the start of a media blitz in defense of the Iranian nuclear deal, U.S. President Obama responded to a question from New York Times columnist Tom Friedman about criticism that a strong stance of the 6 world powers lined up together against Iran should have been able to achieve a better agreement.
And I think that criticism is misguided. Let's see exactly what we obtained. We have cut off every pathway for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. The reason we were able to unify the world community around the most effective sanctions regime we've ever set up, a sanction regime that crippled the Iranian economy and ultimately brought them to the table, was because the world agreed with us that it would be a great danger to the region, to our allies, to the world, if Iran possessed a nuclear weapon. We did not have that kind of global consensus around the notion that Iran can't enjoy any nuclear power whatsoever. And as a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, their argument was we're entitled to have a peaceful nuclear program, and what we were able to do is to say to them, given your past behavior, given our strong suspicion and evidence that you made attempts to weaponize your nuclear program, given the destabilizing activities that you've engaged in the region and support for terrorism, it's not enough for us to trust when you say that you are only creating a peaceful nuclear program. You have to prove it to us. And so this whole system that we've built is not based on trust, it's based on a verifiable mechanism whereby every pathway that they have is shut off. the pathway of enriched uranium. They have to remove 98% of the enriched uranium they have. They have to remove the overwhelming majority of their cascades. And for 10 years, they are under the most severe constraints. And then beyond that, they still have to sign up to an additional protocol that ensures we have the most intrusive inspection regime that's ever been created. They had a facility a heavy water facility that could have created plutonium that was weapons grade. They have to entirely reconfigure that. They had a facility, Fordow, that was underground and so would have been hard to reach. They have to remove effectively the cascades there that could have developed nuclear material. So across the board, what we've been able to do is to assure that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon, and that was always the premise, Tom, of us building this strong international sanctions regime. The notion that the world signed up for these sanctions in order to either achieve regime change, to solve every problem in terms of Iranian behavior, or to say to them in perpetuity they can never have peaceful nuclear power, that was never something that was in the cards.
The general consensus among Republican senators in the United States is that the Iran deal falls short, while Democrats are basically assuming a wait-and-see attitude.
We know that this agreement went from the initial objective of Iran never having a nuclear weapon to a period of time where Iran will be able to behave with impunity and without restraint. There is no addressing in this agreement that we've seen that addresses Iran's role as a chief sponsor of terror throughout the region. There is no addressing of their continued aggression in basically controlling 4 countries: Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Lebanon.
The document's 100 pages long. My staff hasn't read it. I haven't read it. I talked to the president last night. And I think what I'm going to do, and I recommend this to all senators, let's find out what we have first. I don't know what's in the agreement. I have a broad outline of the agreement. I want to find out what is going to transpire with some hearings the Republicans said they're going to hold, and we're going to have briefings from the White House that will be extensive in nature. So I'm going to just wait and see.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is praising the deal and saying that it could lead to a brighter future.
This is a testament to the value of dialogue. I know that an immense amount of work went into this, and I admire the determination and commitment of the negotiators, as well as the courage of the leaders who approved this deal that was so painstakingly worked out by their teams in Vienna and elsewhere. I hope and indeed believe that this agreement will lead to greater mutual understanding and cooperation on the many serious security challenges in the Middle East.
Young Iranians danced in the streets of Tehran last night to cheer the accord that they're hoping will end years of economic sanctions and decades of international isolation. Millions of citizens in the Islamic Republic have been closely following the negotiations in Vienna, with anticipation that the agreement will lead to an expected improvement in their daily lives after the financial situation stabilizes with the lifting of the punitive international measures. Crowds chanted and clapped, and several people waved posters of Zarif. Others shouted praise for the country's leaders and carried photographs of President Hassan Rouhani while draped in the national flag over their shoulders and making the signs of victory. One Washington political analyst says that it will take many years to judge whether the Iranian nuclear deal is successful or not, as he laid out the complexities involved in making any predictions.
It helps you manage one risk posed by Iran, which is the proliferation risk. It doesn't immediately do anything for any of the other issues, and those issues range from Yemen to Lebanon to Syria and elsewhere. I think what the Obama administration hopes and what the Iranian government has promised is if we can cooperate on this, then we can cooperate on any number of things, whether in fact it turns out we cooperate on a wider range of things, or whether it gives the Iranians a sense of impunity and actually worsens Iranian behavior is something we're just going to have to judge over the next several years. It doesn't prevent the Iranians from ever developing a nuclear weapon. It delays the possibility of an Iranian program. It gives the US and the IAEA much more visibility into what the Iranians are doing. But after 15 years, the Iranians arguably will have more money, will have more nuclear scientists, will have all of the development that goes on during this program. And if your bet is that the Iranian government won't change over 15 years, in many ways you have a bigger set of problems at the end of 15 years. If you argue that what this does is it sets Iran on a different path, then you're in a much better situation 15 years from now. Iran certainly will prioritize relations with China and Russia and India and perhaps some countries in the European Union. Whether this leads to some sort of thaw with the United States, whether the anti-Americanism that has been so important to the Iranian Revolution, to Iranian political coherence, diminishes, I think is something that's very hard to read. What President Obama is saying is that you can create incentives for a different Iranian relationship with the world, which in the longer term will make the world safer and maybe even improve lives for a whole range of Iranians, not just Iranians in the regime who are benefiting from sanctions, but ordinary Iranians who would say, our country's interest is in having a positive relationship with the world, not a negative relationship with the world. That this sort of isolation that we've been going through for 35 years doesn't really serve Iranian national interests. Yeah, I don't.
In other news, a 20-year-old IDF soldier was stabbed in the back this afternoon by a female Palestinian at the Beitilu Junction in the Binyamin area near the settlement of Nakhliel. The assailant is reportedly a minor and was captured at the scene. The soldier survived the attack and is being treated for moderate to light wounds. He was carrying out routine security activity with his unit when the terrorists came to their military post, pulled out her knife, and lunged at him. It was today cleared for publication that security forces have arrested several suspected terrorists believed to have murdered 25-year-old Danny Gonen last month, also in the Binyamin region. One suspect has been identified as Mohammed Abu Shaheen of Kalandia, who is a 30-year-old operative with the Tanzim terror faction of the Fatah movement. After asking Gonen and a fellow hiker who survived the incident for water, the killer gunned them down at point-blank range. Security services say that Abu Shaheen masterminded the June 19th murder and is on the payroll of the Palestinian Authority. Another of the suspects was among the more than 1,000 terrorists released in a 2011 Shalit exchange deal with Hamas. Several weapons were also seized during the raid, including the murder weapon. Turning to northern Germany, where former SS Sergeant Oskar Groening was today convicted on 300,000 counts of being an accessory to murder and sentenced to 4 years in jail. The charges relate to the period between May and July of 1944, when the majority of the hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews shipped to the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex in Nazi-occupied Poland were immediately gassed to death upon arrival. Unlike other camp guards brought to trial before him, Groening has been relatively open during the proceedings and testified before the state court in Lundberg that he was a 21-year-old officer who was assigned to catalog money and other valuables stolen from the victims, which prosecutors argued helped the death camp to function. Groening's defense team fought for his acquittal, arguing that as far as the law is concerned, he did not personally facilitate mass murder. At the start of his trial in April, the now 94-year-old said that while he bears a share of the moral guilt for atrocities committed at the camp, it would be up to the judges to determine whether he was guilty according to criminal law. And that they did by handing down a sentence that exceeded the maximum prison term requested by the prosecution. Here at home, there have been positive developments for the mega supermarket chain, which has been teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Following 10 hours of intensive negotiations last night, the Lode District Court approved the proposed debt arrangement between the struggling chain and its creditors. This after the banks agreed to accept guarantees provided by Avigdor Kaplan, who is the CEO of Alone Blue Square Group, which controls Mega. Kaplan's commitments include immediate repayment of 200 million shekels, which would reduce the chain's current $500 million shekel debt by 40%. Stock talk now, and the shekel today increased in strength against all major foreign currencies, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange also edged higher. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team tells us we can expect mostly sunny skies and another slight rise in temperatures tomorrow. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow, and I'll be back to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.